I think this Israel story is interesting because it is one of these things where if it gets worse, if it spirals out of control, then the implications for Americans actually do grow. And you see the sides and the lines that people are drawing, where Andrew Yang put out a very simple tweet on behalf of the Israelis who have, quote, come under bombardment attacks and condemn the Hamas terrorists. The people of NYC will always stand with our brothers and sisters in Israel who face down terrorism and persevere. And he had to walk it back because the cancel mob came for him, as did Gal Gadot, the actress who is Israeli. She plays Wonder Woman, and she said something nice, and then she came under attack. And then we're looking at anti-Israel marches breaking out in Chicago, Israeli flags being burned and synagogues attacked in Germany, Arab riots boiling over in Israel itself. Because remember, there are Arabs who can live comfortably in Israel. Where can the Jews live in the region other than Israel? Not many places, if any. And while they shout Allahu Akbar and a man gets stabbed, a Jewish man. This is the type of stuff where things get, I think, so much more muddied, so much more chaotic. And this is why the Biden administration made such a big mistake by sending a signal that America's guard is down and that Israel is going to be left to its own defenses. They've also empowered Iran with their various deals, who is the funder of all things evil in the region. It is true, and that's the bottom line. And that's why I think this is such a big deal. And yet you have folks who have been pro-Israel for most of their lives, namely this Never Trump contingent of the Republican Party, who is focused on other stuff, focused on non-news items, like, for example, the ouster of Liz Cheney from Republican leadership, which affects people's lives almost not at all. Liz Cheney was someone who voted with Trump a lot, but then turned on him during the impeachment, and she didn't understand that you can't lead a party that sees themselves at war, figuratively speaking, with the left. And they see our party, the Republican Party, the conservative movement, as people who are under constant attack, bombardments of attacks from the left on a 24/7 basis, and she threw down with them. And she continues to do so. She will not back down. We've got some clips to this effect. Let's play one. Let's do 50. Can we play clip 50, folks? Go ahead.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office. We have seen the danger that he continues to provoke with his language.
The danger.
We have seen his lack of commitment and dedication to the Constitution. And I think it's very important that we make sure whomever we elect is somebody who will be faithful to the Constitution.
And she's seen as a part of the old school Republican Party that was a warmongering party. And whether or not that's exaggerated a bit, maybe it is. But for the most part, that is how the old school Republican establishment and Democrat establishment, for large measure, is seen that way, as people who can't stop but get us into wars and leave us into wars forever. And so she already was someone who was probably on the precipice of becoming unpopular within the party. And then she not only turns on Trump, she's losing her leadership role, she's losing her power. And still, she doesn't back down. She is completely defiant from her own people who have said, hey, Liz, you got to cut this out. Trump is not the problem here. The problem is the left in this country. The problem is the globalist corporatist establishment that is encroaching on our freedoms. It's encroaching on our freedoms on a constant basis. And your priorities are completely in the toilet. And this expands to the whole Never Trump movement, who, again, were pro-Israel until all of a sudden Trump became the master of Middle East foreign policy. Then once Trump perfected it, then all of a sudden they don't care about Israel anymore. And what are they tweeting about? This narrative about Liz Cheney. The Liz Cheney stuff was a total distraction by the establishment media. The Republican Party had an internal debate. It was overwhelming. People wanted Cheney to go. Cheney has gone. They will replace her with someone who understands that fighting with the left is a number one priority, someone who backs down because they are pressured by the left, and the establishment media is not in a position to lead the Republican Party at this time. Whoever that person is, probably Elise Stefanik, who's not a perfect person, but is someone who at least gets the media war that we're in, the ideological cultural war that we're in. Once someone like that is tapped, then that person will do probably a fine job. But these people who think that the Republican base gives a care about what CNN and the Washington Post have to say, or even the political establishment has to say, they don't. And if you want to hold your guns and attack Trump and add on to the million people that attack Trump, you're going to lose the faith of the Republican voter base. One thing that I point out is that I've been in Washington for about 8 years, and One thing that I've learned is that the swamp culture really is real. It was not just a talking point from President Trump. And you saw some of that in what I was playing at the end of the last hour with Liz Cheney, and about how she still sticks to her guns, even though it was so clear that she was costing herself massive amounts of political capital. But she had to attack Trump. She couldn't resist. And this is because Washington, in a way, is a single party town. It is not just the Democrat Party, it's the establishment party. And these are people who scratch each other's backs on such a constant basis that people change over time and they can't resist it. And one person that comes to mind at the moment, the guy named Ken Buck, who wrote a book that was supposed to be about draining the swamp. He's a congressman from Colorado, and he was one of the few Republicans who supported Liz Cheney. And Buck is also behind a bill right now that is making its way through the House. We don't know how far along it's going to get, but it's called the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act. And this is a Democrat-backed bill with a couple of Republicans who've signed on, though I've spoke to some of their shops, and many of them think that this was not the bill that was promised to them. But the bill that would allow for big media companies to organize kind of like a union and collectively bargain to get paid by the tech oligarchs in Silicon Valley. And these tech oligarchs, what they would do is they would cut a deal with whoever they felt like, and this union would form, and who would be the most powerful people in the union? It would be the corporate media, the exact same people that discourage independent journalism, that discourage independent voices like Breitbart and all of your favorite individual podcasts and all of your favorite Substack subscriptions that you guys are getting. All of those people are going to be disenfranchised. And you know who's going to be in there? It's going to be the biggest news conglomerates on the planet are going to be cutting deals. And you got this guy, Ken Buck, is the guy who's pushing it across the finish line. He's trying to. And this is something that is so outrageous. But when you understand Washington, you understand how this stuff is possible. You understand that there are people who are always going to be beholden, not just to the almighty dollar, which is, of course, a factor, but the people who back their campaigns, the people who give them support. And eventually these people come around and say, okay, now it's time for us to get ours.